there are certain things that are necessary for you to put in place, right? There's a
Yeah.
founder agreement, shareholders agreement, employee agreements, independent contractor agreements. Because I see this maybe from a tax perspective.
Yeah.
Once you register a company, as much as you're not making money, you need to, report that. So people think, no, I've got 1,000 customers, yay. Tomorrow, those 1,000 customers, you're hacked and, it's in the public domain.
Right.
And now you have to pay 5 million because you're not thinking about Poppy.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Legal Standpoint podcast, where we unpack the legal aspects of starting and running a business venture in South Africa, one conversation at a time. If you are a startup founder, business owner, or freelancer trying to navigate the complexities of compliance, contracts, or intellectual property, welcome. You're on the right side of the internet today. I am your host, Kiti Mintipule, the co-founder of Legal Standpoint, and I'm so excited to introduce today's guest. Today we are sitting with Joseph Nyamariwata, who is the founder of, I did say that correct.
I'm actually impressed.
I've been practicing.
Away.
Joseph, he's the founder of Simple Influence, an e-commerce content creator marketplace that connects brands with diverse creators. He has been in the entrepreneurship space for just shy of a decade, and he has a depth of experiences to share with us just from his learnings. In today's conversation, we'll essentially just be looking at the legalities that he's navigated throughout his different founding experiences. He's been part of quite a number of startups, so he'll chat us through how his perspective has evolved when it comes to the legals of running your business from when he started to where he is now. We'll also chat about just navigating different stakeholder agreements, whether that's with partners or employees or co-founders.
Yeah.
So just exploring the legalities of that. We'll also just chat about, the platform that he's building, Simple Influence, and the plans that they have for that. And, because they work with creators, we're also going to look into the legalities that freelancers or creators in general just need to be aware of when they are engaging in their work. So thanks for joining us, Joseph. I'm so excited for the conversation.
Thank you for the invite. Been looking forward to this.
Yeah,
I know we should have heard it earlier, but
Right. But we're here now.
100%.
I've really been excited to chat to you because I think there's a lot to gain from, someone's perspective and insights,
Okay.
who's been in the entrepreneurship space for years and years,
Yeah.
and someone who's also had experience with different startups, right?
Yeah.
But I think in your journey, your entrepreneurial experience isn't just limited to being a founder or a co-founder.
Yeah.
You've also worked in different incubator spaces. You've been part of different accelerator programs. So I'm really excited to just dive into that and unpack, even from the different programs that you've been a participant in.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest takeaways that you've gotten from those experiences, and things that if you were to start your own accelerator or incubator, you would implement and replicate. I think as a point of departure, we want to get to know Joseph as a person first.
Where do I even start?
Where do we start? We'll take it right
prompts,
to the beginning.
ask me this and then I'll
Yeah.
answer that. If it's too open ended, I might go on forever.
Right. I'll stop you. We only have an
few
hour.
minutes,
So I will stop you.
Okay.
But it's really just to understand, what really drew you into entrepreneurship. Because I think when I talk to different founders, there's always a trigger, that made them think, okay, I know this is what I want to do. For some people, it's something that they stumble across, and it's something that just happened. But for other people, it's something that even when you look at their childhood and how they grew up,
The signs are there, right?
The signs were always there. So I'm curious to know in your journey, because you've had Joe Utopia, which we'll get into. You've had Intuitive Inc., Simple Influence, 123 Tutors. There's been so many different things. The good, the bad, the ugly. You've had to navigate a few different experiences. But could we say if we had to look at your upbringing and your childhood, were there signs? Would you say that you were always gonna go into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, looking back, I think so, but more from a creative perspective, because I've always been a creative, whether it's drawing, whether it's coming up with ideas, or just dreaming about, what life could be.
Yeah.
Even I think that my earliest memories back in primary school, me and my brothers would redraw cars and rename them as our own,
Yeah.
right? Or even just the cartoons we're watching, you sort of reimagine them. And that's at the core of entrepreneurship. You create out of all the resources that you're given.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So from that perspective, that's kind of where the signs, kind of showed that I would always be an entrepreneur. But I also have this analytical brain, so people are usually looked at as left or right brain. I feel like I'm a mixture of both.
Yeah.
By the
Are
way.
you?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I was very good at maths. So which kind of led to me forgetting about entrepreneurship as the
Right.
point of departure coming out of high school, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But as life would have it, different things happened that kind of threw me back, into sort of like my comfort zone, or whatever the
Right.
case may be. Yeah. So the signs were there to answer
Right.
that question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And then I think, since you're talking about your love for math,
Yeah.
I know you studied actuarial sciences at the University of Pretoria.
Yeah.
And I found that really interesting. I'm just thinking about the huge contrast between actuarial sciences that's so structured and, needs like so much discipline and like precision. And entrepreneurship, which is so chaotic, and you're always putting out fires, and like there's a lot of like creativity needed on a day-to-day basis. Chat me through, why you ended up pursuing actuarial sciences for your academic studies, and like how you then pivoted from that into entrepreneurship. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is I looked at all the careers that I could go with maths and which one paid the most ultimately.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And someone told me, hey, you could make $1 million a month or something, which, now thinking back is not even possible as an
Right.
employee. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do actuarial science.
Right.
Because throughout high school, when you do those career fairs and whatever the case may be, I think I always lean towards engineering or architecture, whatever the case may be, since I love drawing. So it made
Right.
sense. But then towards the end, people looking at my maths marks, they're like, yeah, you should probably try actuarial science. And we even went to the UP as well. It was part of an excursion where we met with some actuaries, and one of the things that actually drew me to it was just how many black actuaries there are.
Yeah.
At some point, apparently, you couldn't put them on a plane.
Oh my goodness.
That's how few,
yeah.
We have in terms of qualified actuaries. So that was also something
Yeah.
that drew me to that, to just, add to the statistic,
Right.
black actuaries that actually make it. And I was able to apply and make it into the program. So that's how I ended up there.
Okay, and then let's talk about how you then shifted from
actuarial science
from
to
actuarial sciences, to entrepreneurship, because you like started at UP in 2014,
100%, yeah.
and you were dipping in and out of that, and I guess I'd say like flirting with like entrepreneurship, So what was
so
that
actually,
experience?
what happened was I was having a conversation with one of my cousins, right? So they had started selling these cosmetics. There was a time there was a frenzy around just selling cosmetics to everybody in your family.
Right.
And
Roche Lane and Avon products and that sort of
Literally,
thing.
that was the one. That was the one.
Right, yeah.
So she saw how enthusiastic I was and just how social I'd become actually at university as well. She's like, you could actually thrive in this. And what she was thinking, if I have this boy in my downline, it means I want to make a lot of money. She was not
Right.
thinking about the consequences, right? So I joined, and then I think within a month I was promoted like a manager or something like that. Where I
within
could
a month?
Yeah, exactly. I was that
okay.
kind of dude.
Yeah.
I was literally selling
Yeah.
cosmetics to anyone and their mom on campus.
Yeah.
And from that point on, that journey continued for about a year. But ultimately, you're selling someone else's product. And me being a
Right.
creative, I was like, you know what? I can create my own thing.
Right.
I kind of know how this thing works. I
Yeah.
want to be the person actually that has people under them, selling their product and distributing
Right.
it while I'm the one creating and getting the upside. So
Right.
now the mathematical brain is coming, doing the maths. Okay, I'm making 20%. How much are they making? Before you know it, you're thinking, I could make 100%.
Right.
Why not? Because I
Right.
believe that I could actually create something. And it actually stemmed from something that Steve Jobs once said, right? Which is,
Okay.
the chair that you're sitting on, someone made that chair, right? The products that you use, someone had to create them. Someone who's no smarter than you as well. So I
Okay.
grew up then believing that I could be the next person who creates products that people could use. So with that belief, channeled with the experience I had and the exposure to the money and whatever the case may be,
Yeah.
kind of made it easy to make that transition away from, the 9 to 5, go to school, get a job, and starting your own thing.
Right. Wow. Okay. And I think there's like so many takeaways there relevant for entrepreneurs. The first one sounds like, like self-belief and believing that you have the capability of actually building your own
Yeah,
thing.
that's number one.
And you, like, as entrepreneurs, I think when you're building something from scratch, like, you have to be the first person that believes in yourself and what you're
Before other
building
people, right?
before you can get buy-in from other people. So I think that's like a really good reminder of that it has to start from you. And then another thing that you said is sales, right?
Yeah.
From your experience with selling a Bruce Lane product. And I think that's like maybe one of the like most critical skills that a
Skills.
founder can have.
Yeah.
And maybe you might not have like a solid sales experience, but in fact, when you are a founder starting your own thing,
You're by default.
by
the
default,
first
you're the main
salesperson.
salesperson,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of the first critical sales are founder driven. So are there any other skills outside of sales? Because clearly I can see the connection with sales from a Verish Lane product. But are there any other critical skills that you think founders absolutely have to do and have to be good at that they can't necessarily delegate? But I think there's also a danger with founders maybe thinking, this is not my domain. I need to like get someone else on
Immediately.
board to do it. But
Yeah.
I think there's certain aspects of your business that actually can't be delegated to other people,
Not
especially at the
immediately,
onset.
at least.
Yes.
So when it comes to entrepreneurship, right, most CEOs or founders will tell you that they wear multiple hats because they have to. It's
Right.
not because it's a choice or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So you, out of the passion of realizing that no one else will, no one else will execute this better than you, you kind of have to learn sales, marketing, product development,
Yeah.
business development, legal, HR, or whatever the
Basically
case may be.
everything.
Basically everything,
Yeah.
right? And there's a book called
Yeah.
The E-Myth, right? Which
Yeah.
takes this even a step further to say within each department, before you delegate, you need to become the master and build a system around it so that when you do employ someone,
Yeah.
you are sort of like telling them, okay, this is what I've tried for our business, this is what works. These are the standard operating procedures. Take it and, fly away with it.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't necessarily delegate immediately before you understand your business. And actually, when you do talk to investors as well, they want to talk to a founder who understands every part of their business. Because if something
Absolutely.
goes wrong or whatever the case may be, you are the person that they're gonna look at. You're gonna the one
100%.
that's gonna be held accountable. Right.
Yeah.
And at very early stages, if you're trying to raise funds or whatever the case may be, investors and partners are looking at the founders, they're backing you up versus the idea because it will always
Right.
pivot, it will always change. So I think
Right.
early stages, that makes sense. It's unavoidable. So you kind of have to
Right.
prepare for it. I think the thing that trips a lot of people up, which leads to the high percentage of dropouts in entrepreneurship, is that we're not anticipating the work that comes with actually starting a business.
100%.
People look at the excitement, especially with friends. You are chilling with friends, something happens, like, oh, that could be a business idea.
Right.
And you go do it, but not realizing, hey, now
Yeah.
you gotta build the product, you gotta do research, you gotta do sales, you gotta do marketing,
Right.
and all those things. And if you're not anticipating that, it might actually cut your journey very short.
Yeah, and I think that's like so important as well because there is a lot of work, right?
100%.
Beyond like the idea, like execution is where all the value is tied to. But in your journey, I'm curious now, has there ever been like a business idea that you've had
Yeah.
that you maybe
Misjudged or something.
misjudge? Yeah, I think, thank you for
Yeah,
that. Like,
there
I was struggling there.
was.
Yeah, like the way you misjudged the amount of work
That would go into
that
it.
would go into it, and you had to just
I do have a
change
perfect
course.
idea actually, and I think
Yeah.
it didn't come up in your research because it didn't make it onto LinkedIn or
Yeah.
on my social media feeds.
Yeah.
So I think in 2019, while I was in campus, I started a food sharing business, so a food sharing startup where you'd have students. Because I was thinking, you're in the library, right? 10 p.m. and all the shops are closed and you're hungry.
Yeah.
But your friend out there who had prepared has probably 2 or 3 snacks that they're not gonna eat that night.
Right.
So you may as well buy it from them.
Right.
So I created a platform where students could do that
Yeah.
together. But then upon execution, I found out that obviously you can't do that on campus.
Yeah.
Students are not allowed to sell to each other. You can't exchange cash on campus. You need a lot of permissions for this to actually work.
Right.
So it would only work maybe off campus, which off campus you don't have that aggregation of people in one
Students,
place.
yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So due to those challenges that I did not anticipate, the business actually ended up crumbling. As much as we had traction, there was a time we actually had a competition where we had to vote for the best startup. and we were second with 6,000 votes. But what killed it was actually the difficulty of implementing it and navigating the regulations on campus. Had I anticipated that, maybe it would have been a different story. I would have prepared, maybe first talk to people that are in charge of, selling or cash on campus before I launched.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I mean, yeah, that did not come up in our research. So thanks for mentioning that and giving us something different to think about.
Yeah.
And then I want to take us all the way back to the beginning now with Joe Utopia. Okay. Your first official entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah.
And essentially it was an online platform to help Zimbabwean small businesses procure goods from South Africa.
Yeah.
Right? Talk me through that experience. But the one thing that I'm the most interested in is because it was your first one and you've done so many things after that.
Yeah.
What are the fundamental learnings that you got from Joe Utopia that are still relevant to your businesses today that you still actively apply?
Okay. You ask me that question again if I don't answer it, the last part.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. But in terms of the journey, like I mentioned with the whole average lane selling other people's products, I thought, let me just, apply these skills onto my own product that I own. Right. So, and at the time, being in South Africa, having family back at home and the economic situation, I was one of the people would call to say, hey, yo, we need cooking oil, we need a TV or whatever the case may be. So it happened so frequently that I thought, why am I doing this all for free?
Right.
My entrepreneurial mind had already switched on. So I started charging fees, or at least I would inflate the price or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So that at least I have some money in my pocket.
Right.
And then eventually I thought a way to scale this would be a platform, right? So I approached one of my uncles who was a developer, which was not a good idea at the time,
Working with family?
Working with family, do me a favor.
Yeah.
You work in coding. I have this idea. Please do it for me over the weekend.
Yeah.
Not realizing that's a project that probably could spend months, right? You didn't have the heart to explain it to me for some reason to say, hey, Joe, I can't do this for 2,000 rands, bro. But you did it anyway, but it was, a shoddy job.
Yeah.
So I had to use WhatsApp and Facebook, to sort of look for clients and engage with clients.
Yeah.
Of which it did go well, but then when you're dealing with imports and exports, the other regulations that are involved there, I was bootstrapping, right? I was just like, yo, I'll use buses, I'll use people that I know.
Yeah.
And sort of circumvent the system itself. But then when you circumvent the system, you also now affecting the quality of the product itself. Because you're at the mercy of these people that you can't really hold accountable.
Right.
You're asking them for favors, you're asking them to do things, under the the back
table,
door, under the table, 100%.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that killed the business. Because you use a client today, and one of their products maybe breaks and they don't come back. So it was the churn rate was very high.
Right.
That's what killed that business. And I didn't have the know-how to actually go back to the drawing board. At the time, it was if it fails, move on.
Yeah.
So as far as learning experiences, I think the first one is do your research. Right?
Yeah.
Into the regulations, into just, what is it going to take for you to scale this business?
Yeah.
What I think I did well was bootstrap and start small with the little that I had, which is something I carry on to all my businesses. Right. But then don't just bootstrap forever. Have that in mind that you're bootstrapping for a reason. Document all those lessons. Find what you can actually then implement, what you have to discard, and all of that stuff, right? And then the other thing is also have a more customer-centric approach, right? So for me, it was a thing I was thinking about the dollar itself, the bottom line. And being too focused on that, you cut corners because you're trying to save. You're looking at the maths. How much am I going to make from this deal? And then the one that maximizes what you get is the one you go for. But that's the one that maybe that, makes you lose a client. So I was not really cognizant of, that dynamic of just, if you're customer centric, you might make a loss today, but that customer is going to be with you for a long time. Because especially if it's goods, people don't just buy goods once and they bounce, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's one thing I've carried forth to, other businesses now. Having a more customer centric approach, because that then dictates how you do everything else.
Right.
If you have your customer at the center of it all, they'll always come back to you and they'll give you the dollars and you can reinvest into growing.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's really valuable advice. And, one I think that we hear a lot from entrepreneurs that are very established in their businesses. There's a really good book. I don't know if you've read it, but it's called Focus on the Problem, Not the Solution. and okay, it's by I'll have to come back and like double check the
Yeah,
name,
put
but
on the
it's
screen.
yeah, we'll put it on the screen. But
Yeah.
essentially, he is a 2-time unicorn. UV Levine, UV Levine. He's like an Israeli like 2-time unicorn founder.
Sounds
And
familiar, but I don't think I know him.
yeah, but the book itself is interesting and like the concept of it, where instead of going in like trying to romanticize your
Your idea,
idea,
yeah,
you need to
exactly.
focus a lot on like what the actual product, the actual problem is,
Yeah.
because that's also how you'll get your customers. Like if you're solving a real pain
Problem.
point and a real problem that people are experiencing, that they pay you to solve for them, that's where your energy should be focused, right? And I think being customer centric as well, and like there's a principle in entrepreneurship called design thinking, and it's
Okay.
literally all about like customer centricity and
Okay.
how you have to like have empathy and like always put yourself in the shoes of the customer,
The end
right?
user as well. Yeah.
And the end user, like how are they feeling when they're experiencing this problem? How are they feeling when they have the pain point resolved? Essentially just putting yourself in the customer's shoes so that you have the best possible shot of solving this problem for them.
Yeah, and making money from it. Because at the end
Right.
of the day, like you mentioned, they're only willing to pay for someone to solve their problem, not to support your
100%.
pet project or whatever. I mean,
Exactly.
your mom obviously be like, oh, Nunu's Twara, here's 100
Yeah.
rands. But a real customer is not looking at supporting you. They're
Yeah.
looking at working with you, solve a problem, maybe together, but ultimately, there's got to be a value exchange.
Right. And I think that's like such a nice segue into a conversation around like problem validation.
Okay.
Right. Because I think a lot of us, like when we started like our first businesses or just entrepreneurs generally, like you have an
Yeah.
idea and you think like it's really cool. And you tell, of course, like the people in your sphere of influence. So your
Yeah.
family, your parents, your friends, and they're like, yeah, that's so cool. Like
Well
I'd pay for
done.
that. I'd be a
I
customer.
would pay for that. It's actually one of the things that kill
Yeah.
businesses, because when it comes time to pay,
Exactly.
no one is paying.
So now I'm curious. Let's make this like a practical takeaway moment.
Sure.
For entrepreneurs, what are practical steps you can take to validate your problem and make sure that you're interacting with people who'd actually be willing to pay.
pay, yeah.
Because I think like. Unfortunately, I think our friends and our families mean so well, and they want to like encourage you that,
Yeah.
you're onto something and you should keep building. But I
Yeah.
think sometimes that creates more of a problem and is more to your detriment because you
100%.
end up wasting time on this thing that actually doesn't solve like a real pain
Problem.
point, right?
Yeah, or it solves it for a few
right.
people.
Or it solves it for a few people, and they don't have the heart to tell you, okay, like that's
buddy.
just not the one, like
Try again.
right? So
Yeah.
what are some practical steps? Like if I'm thinking of starting my own business,
Yeah.
and I want to validate that I'm working on something
Like a real
concrete. Like what steps can I take to
Yeah,
validate?
there's actually a good framework for that. I'll recommend people read the book 4 Steps to an Epiphany by Stephen Blank.
Okay.
Right. So it challenges the whole product development idea, like what you're talking about. You have this idea, you want to build a product.
Yeah.
And challenges people to think more from a customer development, right? So you're developing a customer, trying to understand the customer's problems and then build around that.
Yeah.
Right. And the example they gave in the book is, I think, if we think back to banks before we had, these online apps or whatever the case may be, or online queuing systems.
Yeah.
Right. You'd go to a bank that has maybe a long queue. Right. And then within the bank, the manager has already employed, let's say, an IT team
Yeah.
to solve the queuing problem. And then you come through and you're like, oh, yo, but you don't need to do this. I have an app that solves the queuing problem.
Right.
Right. So that person is willing to pay, let's say, 5,000 for your product, as opposed to paying 2 IT professionals to
Yeah.
solve the problem.
Yeah.
So they have the problem and they're actively trying to solve the problem, piecing together a widget, right? And then, so that's an easy customer to sell to,
Yeah.
right? And you can always find similar customers to that. So you're leading first with a customer who's trying to solve a problem by hacking together a solution.
Right.
You come together with a product, an idea that streamlines and makes that easy for them, right? So now what this looks like is you going around and maybe looking at how people are living their lives. You're not necessarily getting married to an idea, but
Yeah.
you're getting married to problems within society.
Right.
And then hopefully you stumble upon a problem that enough people have.
Right.
Right. Even I think if you think back to the Uber thing,
Yeah.
You'd have that maybe someone orders a cab and then collects the numbers of different cab drivers.
Yeah.
But now with an app, you don't have to be going through that. So this is someone who's actively trying to solve this problem for themselves. But with an app like Uber, everything is streamlined and they're willing to actually pay a fraction of whatever they were paying. So that'll be an
Right.
easy customer to talk to help you build out a solution. Right. So this kind of like flips
Yeah.
the whole script from I'm gonna sit down, think of an idea, but now I'm actually in the market looking at behavior, I mean, it's a bit creepy. Obviously, you're looking at people like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you doing that? Like, right now, maybe you
Yeah.
have a watch and you see someone fiddling with it. Like, what are you doing there? Like, no, this thing actually annoys me. It
Yeah.
hurts me. Next thing, you're gonna go to your garage, make something like, hey, I've come up with a better
Right.
strap. You get what I'm
Right.
saying? So
Right.
it's a different way of looking at coming up with ideas that's not internal, but actually
Yeah.
you start first with the customer trying to solve a problem, and hopefully you are the person to solve it better in a cheaper way.
Right. Okay, amazing. I think like really valuable insights from that as well. I'm interested in the jump from when you were a solo founder in Joe Utopia to the rest of your businesses where you've had like a team in place or you've had co-founders.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through what you think like some aspects are that founders maybe overlook when they're going into a partnership with someone or when they're thinking of getting a co-founder? Like
Yeah.
what are some common pitfalls that you think like entrepreneurs make when it comes to finding a co-founder and building with someone?
Yo, how much time do we have?
Not a lot. Let's just briefly like
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind, right, something we already touched on, is just underestimating the amount of work that's ahead. So a lot of people put too much emphasis on the idea, right? To say, I came up with this idea, I'm getting 70% of the pie or whatever the case may be.
yeah.
Not realizing the work is actually ahead, right? Most of the
Right.
value, even right now, if you are to sell your company, what those guys are buying is the future
Future
cash
value,
flow.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you kind of have to prove that you have built it enough to actually for them to capitalize on that, future value. So the work is ahead. I'd
Right.
say think about that. And then two heads are better than one. I think that's an obvious one.
Yeah.
Right. So take your ego out of it. But then with that being said, make sure that those two heads actually can think.
Right.
You don't just
Right.
Because the mistake that most people make is, like I mentioned earlier, you have this idea with your friends. You're
Yeah.
like, okay, so you do marketing. The guy does not know anything to do
About
with marketing.
yeah.
You're very charismatic, so you're gonna do sales. You're very pretty, so you're gonna do marketing. Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
So I think get over that excitement of working with your friends or people that you like, but actually find people that are rock stars within their different fields, so that you delegate adequately, and you can actually depend on them to co-build this new
Yeah.
baby and figure it out together. And then the other
Yeah.
intangibles, obviously, you gotta be working with people that have grit, that are perseverant,
Right.
because the entrepreneurial journey is quite a long one and it's strenuous as well, especially on your health, mentally, physically,
Yeah.
emotionally, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So you're looking at those things and you're looking at them strictly, right? Seriously, you're not compromising.
Yeah.
Because there's something called, I think in development it's called technical debt, but I think it also
Yeah.
exists in other aspects as well.
Yeah.
Where you are making decisions now for today because it feels good, but not realizing this is going
The
to
long-term
the long-term
implications.
effects,
Yeah.
right? And for you to actually correct that will take more than the little work you'd have done
Right.
today.
Yeah.
So I think once you have that in place, it should be easy to sort of like get the ball rolling,
Right.
and everything should fall in place. Once you have the right people on the bus, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter where the bus is going, you're gonna pivot. But once you have the right people on board, it's
Yeah.
easy for you guys to pivot in the right direction.
Right. And I mean, one of the other things I was really interested in coming into this conversation is you have a wealth of experience in very different industries,
Thank you.
which which I thought was really interesting. You've been in the import export business with Joe Utopia.
Yeah.
You've been in the edtech space with like tutoring,
Yeah.
123 tutors.
Yeah.
You've been in the marketing space with Intuitive Inc. and now you are in the e-commerce space,
Yeah.
e-commerce tech space with Simple Influence. Can you chat me through some of the biggest like legal learnings you've had navigating those different businesses? Because I mean, you mentioned with Joe Utopia that you would kind of try and like circumvent the system, and like there were a lot of like regulations that I guess at the onset of like a small business aren't really top of mind, or they don't seem as
Yeah, or
like
they're expensive for you
important,
to actually engage with.
or they like are like a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
But having been in like the different spaces that you've been in, are there any like recurring themes that have come up from a legal standpoint, if you get what I'm saying? Like,
So what you did there.
right. But are there any like recurring legal themes that have come up like
Yeah.
throughout all your businesses?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first one is to go with, rather, is to do with the team, right? So the agreements that you have as founders.
Yeah.
So over time, like I mentioned earlier, with the excitement, also what comes is, people forget that, hey, this is actually a company. We need to have paperwork. I know I trust you. You're my friend. We used to
Yeah.
have dinner together. You're my mom. Our moms know each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't matter when the money comes in.
Yeah.
People forget, hey, that we used to have dinner, we used to sleep over at our places.
Right.
It's like, guys, I have 75%
Right.
because I came up with the idea.
Right.
La la la, all those things. So I think making sure that you get that out of the way as quickly as possible, the paperwork, do it in a way that obviously does not offend people. It's a respectful way.
Yeah.
Given that we are formalizing and obviously incorporating a company, there are certain things that are necessary for you to put in place, right? There's
Yeah.
a founder agreement, shareholders agreement, employee agreements, independent contractor agreements.
Yeah.
All of those things, you kind of need to have them in place as you start the business, because it will help you as well sort of outline what the different responsibilities are. If you have them on paper, it's easy for you to hold people accountable. It's easy for you to fire people or hire people, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So that's number one. And then also, depending on the industry you're operating in, you don't want to first start, have this business go on for so long,
Yeah.
and then have maybe a few years down the line that, hey, by the way, you've been operating illegally.
Right.
What that does is it destroys your chances of working with bigger clients, right? Working with funders, right? That have other
100%.
compliance requirements. Because I see this maybe from a tax perspective.
Yeah.
Once you register a company, as much as you're not making money, you need to, report that. Your tax returns don't necessarily have to be because you're making money.
Right.
Even if you're making zero, CIPC or SARS need to know, oh, you made zero.
Right.
So if you go years without actually recording that, you put your company at a bad position. Because I remember with Intuitive Inc., there was a time we needed to have a contract with University of Pretoria.
Yeah.
And one of the requirements was they have to be in good standing from a tax perspective.
Yeah.
Be able to register for VAT or whatever the case may be, right? And had we not been, diligent in making sure that even though we're not making a lot of money, we're making sure that by the time we need to produce this document, it's there. We would not have gotten that deal.
Right.
So, and you'd imagine what that does to your cash flow or just the longevity of your business.
Yeah.
So those things from an early stage, you need to be thinking about them. Think about the things that you need probably in the future. Work backwards to see how do I best position myself to make sure that I'm able to participate in those situations without, being, what's the opposite of compliant? Non-compliant.
Non-compliant. Yeah.
Yeah, that word.
Yeah. Ding,
Right.
ding, ding.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think, and obviously other regulations depend on the industry. Whether if you're in health tech, the different regulations, the different requirements. If you're in education, I think in one of them that applies to all industries, the POPI one that's coming up nowadays. Yeah,
Protection of Personal Information Act. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I just couldn't use POPI.
Yeah.
But with that one, it's one thing that people obviously forget about. You taking people's information into your business.
Right.
You becoming a custodian of that information, right? We recently learned at one accelerator that there's a penalty of 5 million rands if for whatever reason that information leaks and it's found out that you were negligent with that information, right? So people think, no, I've got 1,000 customers, yay. Tomorrow, those 1,000 customers, you're hacked and, it's in the public domain. And now you have to pay 5 million because you're not thinking about Poppy.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go on and on, but I think the moment, if you just think ahead to some of the engagements you're going to have and think back to how you can start preparing now, even the things that are obvious, I think you probably be set.
And I mean, I think the important takeaway from that is you don't necessarily have to be, making millions and, be like in a good standing, like revenue wise or fundraising wise,
For you to be
for you
compliant.
to be compliant and to take the
Legal.
regulatory landscape seriously.
Seriously, yeah.
And I think that's maybe the pitfall that a lot of early stage founders fall into, where like, well, we're small enough, I'm sure we're not like, it doesn't matter, right?
And thing is,
Yeah.
when you're small, no one cares. But sometimes you can grow overnight.
But
Now
that's what I'm
everyone
saying.
cares.
Exactly. Like, so, essentially just taking on the mindset of someone who's already making millions and already
work
has like a big
backwards.
spotlight on them,
Yeah.
and, being stringent with yourself about having those right documents in place from day one.
Can I just add
Yeah.
there? I think one thought that just came to mind now,
Yeah.
back to the team composition. I think within as an entrepreneur, you're thinking, I just need to build. I'm a builder. I don't want to worry about the admin,
Yeah.
the legal. So it helps then to have someone on the team who's going to obsess over those things.
Right.
Their job is not necessarily to build the product, but their job is just to make sure that you guys are compliant,
Yeah.
etc., whatever the case may be.
Right.
So you don't necessarily, as the founder, have to be worrying about that, but make sure that that is covered.
Right.
That's where the composition of the team comes in, and making
Right.
sure the person who is heading that department is obsessed with admin.
Right.
And people like that exist, trust me.
Yeah, right.
They're very, psyche about, making sure that, all the contracts, they double check, triple check,
Right.
or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. No, really important insights. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we're running out of time. In this conversation, like we could go on and on clearly. But now, you're building Simple Influence, which is a
Yeah.
really exciting startup. For those who don't know, Simple Influence was just part of Google for Startups. So, really making like big strides. You went to
Yeah.
Canada recently, through Simple Influence or because of Simple Influence. So, it's a startup that's really exciting to watch just from the sidelines.
My favorite so far. Yeah.
Right. That's lovely. So every new business like is your new favorite.
100%. Yeah.
But I think, it's a space where you're targeting brands, you're targeting content creators,
Yeah.
influencers. And I'm just curious about observations that you've made when it comes to founders and how seriously they, take their contracts. If you've seen any patterns where maybe they like overlook certain clauses in their contracts, in their agreements, and I think the flip of that, right? The flip side of that is, are there like specific clauses that you think creators need to always look out for
yes.
in their contracts before they sign the dotted line?
Yeah, the first one is obviously usage rights, right? So some naughty managers, they would slip in, indefinite, access to their content or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So just make sure that when it comes to usage rights, you guys are agreeing on, how much and how long they can use your content for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, they need you just as much as they need them.
Right.
So the mistake that content creators make is that when they're young, they're so eager to get their first deal going, whatever. They don't even look at the entire ecosystem to say, oh, you are actually a player within this ecosystem.
Yeah.
And you have your own rights as well.
Right.
So if a brand wants to use your content for a campaign and then want to use them on TV,
Yeah.
that's actually a potential revenue stream. But then if it's baked into one contract,
Right.
you've lost out and they've gained. Because they're going to make money from
100%.
TV, make money from you using your likeness. 'Cause
Yeah.
now these people have seen you on TikTok. Now they're seeing you on TV.
Yeah.
They think you're getting paid, but no, because you didn't read the fine
You didn't
print.
read the fine print.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah.
And then the other ones is also maybe on deliverables, just making sure they're clear. How many revisions?
Yeah.
What do you need to invest in terms of just creating that content itself?
Yeah.
Because one thing that brands forget, or at least they overlook, is that there's a production cost to actually creating the content itself.
Yeah.
They'll pay you, yes, your fee to distribute on your audience.
Right.
But then what about the fee for me to get an Uber to go to the studio?
Right.
What about me booking that studio?
And they add up, right? Yeah.
And they add up. They
Yeah.
then chow into the actual amount that you're getting from the brand
Right.
itself. So I think looking into that as well, just making sure that you also leverage your own audience to command a reasonable amount that
Yeah.
helps you make this thing sustainable.
Right.
Yeah, and other things, I mean, they're plain vanilla. I can't really think of anything at the top of my mind.
Yeah.
But things just to protect how much you get from the deal, making sure that the deal is fair from both sides. I
Right.
think is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think even just those two clauses on their own, to be honest, are really important considerations. And yeah, I can see how it's so easy to overlook certain things because you're excited about maybe like the amount you're getting from a certain deal, and you overlook the future implications and ramifications of getting into that brand partnership.
Exactly.
So thank you for sharing that, and hopefully like creators and influencers will, they read their contracts a little bit more seriously, and over and above doing it themselves, like actually getting experts in the space to help them navigate that. Okay, awesome. And then just to wrap up, because this conversation has like flown by and there are like so many things that we could talk about still. But just, when we're looking at all the different experiences you've had throughout your different startups, what would you say has been the best legal advice you've gotten?
Yeah, co-founder contracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, co-founder contracts. Without that, you're really putting yourself at a disadvantage, because it really becomes important when the company starts making money. And now you need to decide who's getting what, all those things.
Yeah.
So I think having an agreement from the get-go when you have nothing in the bank is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you should stipulate what happens in different events. What happens when we exit? What happens when you make $1 million? What happens when there's no money in the bank? Are we taking loans? Are we working for free? Are we taking a pause? So it needs to be very granular to a point where it's actually psychotic. But having that in place will help you guys navigate this properly. And also, it puts you in a better position to build confidence with investors, knowing that they're putting money into a venture that's protected.
Right.
You know, they're not going to put money before you know it. Gate today's day in Thailand with the money. Whatever the case
Having a good time in Thailand.
You know what I'm saying? Like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? We just invested in these people. What are they doing in Thailand?
And that happens a lot, right? Like,
it does.
Especially
More
in the
than people
US,
think.
right.
More than people
They'll
think.
give you money, and then next thing you'll be having a good time in the club, okay?
Yeah, the whole family in the club, right?
Right.
So I think if co-founder agreement and just a shareholder agreement, just around the formation of the company, very important. Very
Amazing.
vital.
Yeah, really, really valuable insights. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really lovely conversation. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I've learned a thing or two as well,
Really?
so thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I hope, especially for like creators and freelancers that'll be listening to this conversation, that they also get like practical takeaways from it, and just take proactive steps to protect themselves and like really watch out for the terms that they're agreeing to when they're getting into different partnerships.
Read the fine print,
Yeah. All right, awesome. So that's been another episode of the Legal Standpoint podcast. I hope that you've walked away with practical, valuable insights that you can apply to your entrepreneurial journey. Thank you for tuning back in with us. And if you haven't watched any of our other episodes, you can go back and watch the rest that we've recorded. And remember, if you are a startup founder, a freelancer, nonprofit founder even, or just a business owner, and you're looking for someone to help you navigate the complexities of the legal world, Legal Standpoint is here to help you. Check us out on LinkedIn, on our website. We'll list all the details below. But it's been such a pleasure having this conversation, and we'll see you again soon.